here on the Gulf Coast, for all the conversations I've had with folks about the cleanup effort and the oil on shore and the booms and the jobs and the health worries and the fishery. Everyone is still quite acutely focused on the engineering project that is still going on way, way, way behind me, miles out in the Gulf and miles below the Gulf. The engineering project to put a lid on that darn well that is still gushing. Although it may be a little bit hard to see it under all the gushing oil that you see in this image, they do say that the containment cap was successfully placed over the wellhead last night. So far, BP says the cap is managing to collect oil at a rate of about 1,000 barrels a day. That is a fraction of what's leaking. It's not stopping more of the oil right now, in part because the cap has some open vents on it through which all the oil that we can clearly see here is still gushing out. BP's plan is to close those vents slowly, one by one. They hope that will prevent buildup of the icy, slushy hydrates that caused the last containment dome thing to float off the wellhead and do no one any good at all. But this is what the current effort looks like right now. If you want to know how it's going, the government's commander on the scene, Admiral Thad Allen, told reporters today, quote, "I think we need to caution against over-optimism here." I can tell you that over-optimism is not a problem at this point along the Gulf Coast. Bear in mind that BP is not even trying to cap the leak anymore. They're just trying to use this containment thing to contain and retrieve as much of the oil as they can. And even in the best-case scenario, where they are able to contain a lot of the oil using that cap and funnel it up to a ship on the surface, even in the best-case scenario, once a hurricane comes along, and they do tend to turn up here from time to time, once a big storm comes, they will have to unhook from that containment funnel contraption and have the ship come ashore and let the oil flow freely into the Gulf again until it is safe to put the ship back. That's the best case scenario. That's what they're aiming for. For the next couple of months, they're not even trying for more than that. Their best hope for actually stopping the leak remains the 2 relief wells that BP is drilling. They won't be ready until August at the earliest. August is the best case scenario for stopping the underwater volcano of oil, for lack of a better term. The relief well is a known technology. It's worked before, as you've heard reported in the last few weeks. But it hasn't always worked the first time. The Montara spill off the northwest coast of Australia last summer required 5 tries at a relief well before they were able to hit the right spot to plug that thing up. The Ixtoc spill back in the Gulf of Mexico in 1979, that required the drilling of 2 relief wells. That blown well gushed for 9 months before those relief wells finally worked. In the best case scenario right now, mark your calendars for August and cross your fingers. That's if they, here in 5,000 feet, hit the relief well the first time. Meanwhile, in terms of America's drilling policy, it is situation normal, all fouled up. Last week, President Obama announced he was stopping all deep-water drilling in the Gulf of Mexico for the next 6 months. But his moratorium didn't apply to shallow water wells, what they call shallow water wells, any drilling at depths of 500 feet or shallower. So 2 days ago, the Minerals Management Service issued a permit for a new shallow water well about 50 miles off the coast here. That was 2 days ago. Yesterday, the MMS rescinded that permit, saying in an email, quote, "Until further notice, we have been informed not to approve or allow any drilling, no matter the water depth." Then, after that, we heard this. Interior Department denies it has extended drilling freeze to shallow Gulf waters. The MMS, remember, is part of the Interior Department. So the message from the government was, in other words, yes, you can now drill this shallow well. No, you can't drill this shallow well. Yes, you can now drill this shallow well. Which is it? Turns out the MMS will allow drilling in shallow water to go forward, but right now it won't issue new permits for that until companies applying for them meet new safety and environmental regulations. Once they comply with the new regulations, they get to drill. Because we shouldn't allow this deep water disaster to interfere with safe, simple, shallow water drilling. Anything less than 500 feet of water, no big deal, right? We know how to do that. The Ixtoc well that gushed for 9 months, that Montara oil spill last summer off Australia, those were both shallow water wells. Montara was 240 feet below the surface, but it gushed an estimated 3.9 million gallons of oil. Ixtoc was at 160 feet of water, but it managed to gush an estimated 138 million gallons. Disasters happen. There's nothing magical that happens when you get above 500 feet. You should also know that the moratorium on wells only accounts for new drilling. It doesn't shut down wells that have already been drilled and are currently producing oil and gas through those drilled holes, as was happening when the Deepwater Horizon rig blew up. Those existing wells made it through the same permitting process that the Deepwater Horizon did. Those wells made it through a minerals management service that exempted BP from doing a detailed environmental impact analysis. The same agency that estimated that a big oil spill from the Deepwater Horizon well would not likely get bigger than 4,600 barrels and that the oil wouldn't reach the coast. As I mentioned, President Obama visited the coast today, touring affected areas like Grand Isle, just a few miles from where I'm sitting. While he was in Louisiana, he defended the moratorium against concerns about its economic impact.
When I made the decision to issue the moratorium, we knew that that would have an economic impact. But what I also knew is that there was no way that we can go about business as usual when we discovered that companies like BP, who had provided assurances that they had fail-safe, backup, redundant systems, in fact, not only didn't have fail-safe systems, but had no idea what to do when those fail-safe systems broke down. I do not want to see this thing repeated again. And the American people don't, and I promise you the people of the Gulf don't want to see it either.
The president also took the opportunity to keep the pressure on BP for paying out claims to local fishermen.
My understanding is that BP has contracted for $50 million worth of TV advertising to manage their image during the course of this disaster. In addition, there are reports that BP will be paying $10.5 billion, that's billion with a B, in dividend payment this quarter. I want BP to be very clear. They've got moral and legal obligations here in the Gulf for the damage that has been done. And what I don't want to hear is when they're spending that kind of money on their shareholders and spending that kind of money on TV advertising, that they're nickel and diming fishermen or small businesses here in the Gulf who are having a hard time.
Joining us now is Admiral Thad Allen, the National Incident Commander for the spill, who traveled with the president to Grand Isle today. Sir, I know you're a very, very busy man. Thank you very much for your time.
Evening, Rachel.
What's the latest you can tell us about the attempt to put that cap on that riser pipe? Is it working? Is there a lot of oil still flowing into the Gulf at the seabed?
Rachel, I think you explained it pretty good. If I could just add a couple of modifiers there. When they put the containment cap down, the pipe was filled with inert nitrogen gas so the oil wouldn't spew up fast enough where it would draw water in and create the hydrates, as you mentioned earlier. They were slowly shutting off the vents, the oil that is venting that you can see on television, and have started to produce natural gas and oil on the ship above, and they're going to slowly increase that production rate over the next 24, 36 hours to see how high they can bring that production rate up and reduce the pressure.
Admiral, I understand that the first priority has to be to cap that well, and I actually want to congratulate you on your efforts to communicate to us clearly about how the progress on that is going. But keeping the oil offshore and getting it out of the water, I have to say, being here in Grand Isle for a couple of days, it feels like a complete disaster. How much of the fault there is because we just don't have good technology to keep oil offshore? We don't have good technology to get it out of the water? And how much of that is just that we could have done a better job with this?
Well, Rachel, not only does it feel like a disaster, it is a disaster. Anytime oil is on the water, nobody should be happy about it. I think it's a combination of issues. You alluded to the fact that maybe technology offshore has gone faster than our ability to respond to some of the problems that technology presents us. And a lot of the oil spill response technology that we are applying in this particular spill has been created over the last 20 years following the Exxon Valdez and the landmark legislation that followed that, the Oil Pollution Act of 1990. I think when all this is done, we're going to have to sit down and see whether or not that technology maybe hadn't atrophied over those 20 years while the technology in deep oil drilling had moved further offshore and maybe created a bigger risk envelope. And I think that's certainly something we need to look at.
In terms of one specific part of technology that's very much in evidence in these coastal communities and in the communities that are expecting the oil but haven't yet seen it, it's booming. And some of the boom is better than other booms, but a lot of what we've seen here off of Grand Isle in particular is very ineffective. It looks like it was either put up incorrectly or it was put up correctly, didn't survive much weather, and it is not being tended. You see it snarled in places looking like wet spaghetti or hair in a shower drain. It's not doing the job it's intended to do. Is it a question of not enough manpower to tend those booms and not enough training?
It could be that, Rachel. I think there's maybe a misconception of what boom can do and what it can't do. First of all, boom in certain conditions is capable of gathering oil until it can be collected, but it can be defeated by wave height and oil going over the top and oil going below it, and it's not effective against tar balls and things that get below the surface. So for what it's intended to do, it can